They call it the farm. A place where the sun burns like punishment, and the soil remembers every drop of blood ever spilled on it. Here, men plow the same fields where enslaved people once worked, only now they wear orange instead of chains. At night, the silence of Angola Prison is broken only by the hum of the electric chair room, a reminder that this farm still harvests lives. Before we step inside America's most haunted prison, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear is as real as death itself. The road to Angola stretches for miles through Louisiana farmland, bordered by cypress trees and muddy rivers that twist like veins. There are no nearby towns, no gas stations, no last stops. Once you turn off Highway 66, it's just you, the dust, and the knowledge that the road ahead ends where freedom does. Locals call this stretch the longest mile in the South. At the end of it stands a massive iron gate marked Louisiana State Penitentiary. Beyond that gate lies a self-contained world, 48 square miles of razor wire, cotton fields, and sorrow. Angola is so vast that it has its own zip code, fire department, and television station. But make no mistake, this is not a community. It's a kingdom of confinement, ruled by time itself. Once, this land belonged to a slave plantation owned by a man named Isaac Franklin. It was named after the country his captives came from, Angola in West Africa. When slavery was abolished, the fields didn't rest. Instead, they were leased out to the state, and convicts, mostly black men, were forced to work them under armed guards. It was slavery by another name. Over a century later, those same fields still stretch across the horizon, and the men who till them are still mostly black, still watched by guards on horseback with shotguns slung across their shoulders. The morning air at Angola carries a smell of damp soil, sweat, and diesel. At dawn, hundreds of inmates line up outside long, low barracks, waiting for their work assignments. Some go to the fields, some to the metal shop, others to the abattoir where livestock are slaughtered for the prison kitchen. The rhythm never changes. Labor, eat, sleep, repeat, until parole, death, or the grave releases them. For the men on death row, even that rhythm is a luxury they don't have. Tucked away in a section known as Camp F, the condemned live in narrow cells about 6 feet wide. From their windows they can see the same sunrise as the field workers, but it means something different. Each new dawn is one less they'll ever see. Guards call them by number, not by name. And every few months, when the air turns heavy and whispers travel down the corridor, everyone knows, someone's number has come up. Death at Angola isn't loud. It's scheduled, bureaucratic, sanitized. But it's not forgotten. Point Lookout Cemetery sits just beyond the main compound, a field of plain white crosses where the unclaimed are buried. The wooden markers have no names, only numbers. Some lean, some rot away, but all of them tell the same story: men who entered Angola and never left. In the early 1900s, reporters described Angola as hell on earth. Prisoners were whipped, starved, and worked until their bodies broke. Suicides were common. Escapes ended in gunfire or the bayou. Things have improved, at least on paper. But even today, former inmates say the old spirit of the place still lingers, the sense that life here is borrowed time. There's a saying among Angola's lifers: the only way out is through the front gate, or through Point Lookout. Every man who steps inside understands this. Some pretend not to care. Some find faith. Others simply fade, swallowed by the endless heat and silence. When you stand near that gate and look past the fences, the rows of crops seem to shimmer in the distance, almost peaceful, like the land itself is pretending. But listen closely and you'll hear it: the clang of metal doors, the bark of orders, the echo of a world built to break men. Angola doesn't just confine the body, it consumes the soul. Angola is not just a prison. It's an ecosystem, built to survive without ever opening its gates to the outside world. Everything that happens here is designed to keep the place running, from the crops in the soil to the men behind the bars. At sunrise, the siren wails across the compound, a cold, metallic cry that echoes through the fog. Inmates rise from metal bunks, some rubbing their eyes, others already dressed in faded orange. There's no hesitation, they've learned the rhythm. The line riders, guards on horseback, wait outside with rifles and radios, their silhouettes sharp against the mist. Inside the chow hall, breakfast is quick and quiet: powdered eggs, grits, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Conversation is limited to whispers, because nobody wants to draw attention before work call. After eating, the men form lines that snake through the compound. The guards shout names and numbers, sorting them by crews: Field Line 1, Field Line 2, Livestock, Kitchen, Maintenance. The field lines are the heart of Angola. They move like slow rivers of orange and brown, cutting across cotton and soybean fields that stretch beyond sight. Each man carries a short-handled hoe. Behind them, a mounted guard watches every movement, his horse's breath visible in the morning chill. The unspoken rule is simple: keep your head down, keep the line straight, and don't speak unless spoken to. The sun rises fast in Louisiana. Within an hour the air thickens. Sweat rolls down necks. Shirts cling to backs. The soil bakes hard. And yet the rhythm continues: chop, pull, step, chop. The only breaks come when the guard calls for water, or when someone collapses from heat. It's hard to imagine this is the 21st century, not 1850. Angola grows most of what it eats. Its herds supply meat for the kitchen, its gardens produce vegetables, and its canneries store food for months. The irony is cruel. Men who may never taste freedom still grow the food that feeds others. Some of it even ends up in state cafeterias and schools. The prison is self-sufficient, efficient, and profitable. But for the men doing the labor, it's just another way to pass time in a place that already owns every hour they have left. Inmates often say the farm teaches you two things: endurance and silence. You learn how to work with your eyes half closed, how to hide pain behind stillness. You learn to move when told, stop when ordered, and speak only in low tones. Angola is full of sounds: the hum of machinery, the creak of saddle leather, the murmur of men reciting prayers while they hoe the ground. Yet underneath it all lies a deep quiet, a shared understanding that nothing here belongs to you, not your time, not your labor, not even your body. Inside the main camp, the structure mirrors a small town. There's a post office, a library, a hospital, and even a prison rodeo arena. Every October, thousands of visitors from outside come to watch inmates ride bulls and wrestle calves for prize money. It's the only day the walls seem to breathe. But when the gates close again, the show ends and reality settles back in. Angola doesn't exist for entertainment. It exists for control. Some of the older inmates, men who've been here since the 1970s and 80s, say the farm never truly changed. The uniforms are different. The whips are gone. But the feeling of being watched, of being owned by the system, remains. They call it the invisible chain. You can't see it, but you feel it every morning when the siren sounds. In the evenings, when the crews return, the yard glows under the orange lights. The men file through strip searches, their boots heavy with dust. Some head to the chapel, some to the showers, others to the yard for a few minutes of air. Laughter is rare, but sometimes, music escapes from the dorms. A blues guitar, a hum, a soft gospel tune that floats across the compound. It's fragile but real. That's how Angola breathes, through the small things that refuse to die. A song, a memory, a dream. The prison feeds itself, yes, but it also feeds on the men who keep it alive. And for those on death row, the farm's rhythm doesn't reach their cells at all. Their days unfold differently: locked doors, timed showers, short walks in cages they call dog runs. No sunlight on their backs. No dirt under their feet. Just the sound of their own heartbeat, counting down. Some of them still work, clerks, cleaners, or kitchen helpers, but under constant watch. Others write letters that never get answers. A few find religion. A few lose their minds. And then, sometimes in the still of night, a truck rolls past Camp F toward the white building with the heavy steel door, the execution chamber. That's where we go next. Death at Angola doesn't arrive suddenly. It moves slowly like humidity through the walls, silent, heavy, and impossible to escape. When a man's execution date is set, the prison begins what they call the procedure. It sounds clinical. But inside these gates, it's sacred in its own grim way, a ritual practiced for generations, passed from one warden to the next like a dark tradition. The condemned man always knows before anyone tells him. He can feel it in the change of tone from the guards, in the sudden quiet of his tear. Inmates stop shouting across cells. Conversations die mid-sentence. Then one morning a piece of paper slides under his door. Black ink. Official seal. It's his execution notice, the final schedule of his life. From that moment, time becomes both too much and too little. The next few days unfold with eerie precision. His meals improve slightly, better portions, real meat, sometimes even dessert. The guards call him by name again. A chaplain visits daily. Lawyers make last appeals. He's allowed to choose a final meal, though most barely touch it. By then, appetite has vanished, replaced by a cold emptiness that no food can fill. Angola's death chamber sits inside a small, white building near Camp F. The walls are thick, the air conditioning constant, the lighting too bright. Everything inside feels frozen in time, as if the room itself is afraid to move. There's the execution gurney, padded and restrained, the glass viewing window for witnesses, the control room beyond. This is where Louisiana carries out its sentences, once by electrocution, now by lethal injection. But the energy of the old chair, gruesome Gertie, still lingers here. The stories say that when they used it, the lights of the entire compound would flicker for a second, as if the prison itself blinked. On execution day, guards from different units volunteer for the detail. It's considered an honor, or at least that's what they tell themselves. They dress in pressed uniforms, boots polished, badges gleaming. At 5 p.m., they escort the condemned from his cell to the holding room, known as the last stop. He walks with shackled hands and feet, flanked by guards who keep their eyes forward. Every step echoes through the corridor, a sound so sharp that even the insects outside seem to pause. There he meets the warden, the chaplain, and the prison doctor. They ask the same question they've asked for decades. Do you have any last words? Some men speak. Some curse. Some pray. One inmate in 1997 said softly, "I'll see y'all on the other side." Another refused to look anyone in the eye. The warden nodded, signaled to the team, and the ritual continued. Inside the chamber, it's cold enough to make you shiver. The condemned is strapped to the gurney, one arm extended, for lines taped in place. The chaplain stands by his feet, whispering a final prayer. Through the glass, witnesses sit stiff and silent. Journalists, lawyers, family members, sometimes even the victim's kin. The hum of the fluorescent light is the only sound. When the warden gives the signal, a curtain slides open. The executioner, unseen, anonymous, presses a button. The first drug, a sedative, flows through the line. Then the paralytic. Then the one that stops the heart. Within moments, the chest rises once, twice, then stills. The doctor steps forward, checks the pulse, and says the words every man in that room remembers. Time of death. Afterward, the witnesses are let out quietly. The body is taken to the prison morgue, washed and wrapped in white cloth. If no one claims it, it's carried by truck to Point Lookout Cemetery. There, in the stillness of dawn, a small burial crew, inmates themselves, dig the grave, lower the box, and mark it with a simple white cross. No name. Just a number. A preacher murmurs a few words. The soil is filled in. And another life disappears into the ground that has already claimed thousands before him. Some say the nights after an execution are the quietest Angola ever gets. Even the guards speak in hushed tones. The air feels heavier, the lights dimmer, as if the prison itself mourns. But by morning the siren sounds again. The field lines move out. The tractors start. The rhythm continues. In Angola, death doesn't stop life. It becomes part of it, woven into the soil, carried by the river, whispered by the wind that sweeps over Point Lookout. And for the men who remain behind those walls, every time the siren wails, they know it's not just a signal to work. It's a reminder. Someday it might wail for them too. If Angola is built on pain, its chapel is built on hope. Fragile, flickering, but stubborn enough to survive. It sits near the center of the compound, a low white building with a small cross on top, surrounded by barbed wire like everything else. From the outside it looks ordinary. But step through its door and you feel something different. A shift in the air, a weight lifted just slightly. For many men here, it's the only place inside the walls that doesn't feel like a cage. The Angola Prison Chapel was born out of desperation. In the 1970s, violence ruled the yard. Stabbings, riots, gang wars, death wasn't rare, it was routine. Then a few inmates, broken by years of chaos, began holding prayer circles in secret. They'd whisper verses in the dark, sharing scraps of hope between lockdowns. Over time those circles grew. And by the 1980s, Angola, the same place once called America's bloodiest prison, had more inmate ministers than any other penitentiary in the country. Today the chapel hosts daily services, baptisms, and even funerals for men who never made it home. The irony is cruel. It takes a lifetime sentence for some men to finally find peace. When the choir sings, their voices echo down the concrete halls, deep, rough, and raw. They're not polished singers. They're lifers, murderers, robbers, men who've seen the worst of the world and of themselves. But when they sing Amazing Grace, it's not just a song. It's survival and melody. Even guards stop outside to listen. For a moment, Angola feels almost human. Across the yard, the sound of chains tells a different story. The chain gang, crews of men working under guard, still operates today, though no longer with leg irons. Now it's the weight of labor, not metal, that binds them. They repair fences, dig ditches, haul supplies, and maintain the endless fields. The work is backbreaking, the pay pennies. But it's better than the alternative, sitting in a cell with nothing but your thoughts. One inmate interviewed years ago said, Work keeps your head from going crazy. Out there, even with the guards watching, you can feel the sky. For men serving life, that's something close to freedom. But for those on death row, the chain gang is a ghost story, a sound they'll never hear again. Their labor ends at the walls of their cells. Still, the prison depends on this balance: punishment and purpose, despair and redemption. Warden Burl Cain, who led Angola for 2 decades, used religion as his reform tool. He once said, "You change a man's heart, you change his behavior." And by many accounts he did. Violence dropped. Bible studies filled the dorms. Men who once stabbed each other now prayed together. But critics called it salvation by control. They argued that faith here wasn't born of choice, it was survival under pressure, another system of obedience disguised as redemption. Inside the chapel there's a mural that says, "God brings life to the dead." For men living in the shadow of Point Lookout, those words carry weight. Every week, ministers walk the rows of death row cells, offering prayer through the bars. Some men accept it, some don't. One preacher, a former inmate himself, said, "You can't fake faith in here. The walls will test every word you say." As the sun sets, the chapel lights flicker across the compound. The music fades, replaced by the sound of doors slamming shut, hundreds of them one after another. It's Angola's nightly symphony, faith followed by confinement. And for the men who knelt in prayer just hours earlier, the echo of those locks is a reminder that grace doesn't unlock steel. Still, in the darkness, some continue to believe. They believe in second chances, even in a place built for final ones. They believe that redemption can exist beside punishment. And maybe, in some strange way, that's what keeps this place from collapsing under its own sorrow. Because in Angola, the chain gang keeps the body alive. But the chapel keeps the soul from dying. In Angola, silence speaks louder than words. But sometimes, in letters, in whispers, or in the way a man looks at the sunset through barbed wire, you hear what the place is really saying. The truth of Angola doesn't come from the guards or the wardens. It comes from the men who live it day after day, season after season, until time itself forgets their names. A lifer once wrote in a smuggled note, "You don't count the years here. You count the harvest. When the soybeans bloom, you're older. When the fields go dry, you've buried another friend." That line ended up in a newspaper story decades ago, unsigned but instantly recognized by every man inside. Because at Angola, that's how time moves, not by calendars but by seasons of work and loss. One man, Raymond, had been locked up since the 1970s. He'd seen wardens come and go, the death chamber moved from building to building, even the rodeo grounds rebuilt twice. When asked what had changed most, he said softly, "The faces. I used to know everybody. Now, I don't even know myself." He'd buried over 20 friends in Point Lookout Cemetery. Some died of old age. Some by sickness. Some by the state. He never attended the funerals, inmates weren't allowed to, but he'd always stop working when he saw the burial truck pass. That was his way of saying goodbye. Another inmate, known only as LJ, described life on death row like this: "Every night I dream of doors. Some open to light, some to nothing. I wake up before I walk through any of them." He'd been awaiting execution for 19 years when he wrote that. By the time the letter reached a reporter in Baton Rouge, LJ was already gone. For many of these men, writing is the only way to leave Angola before they die. Letters travel farther than bodies ever will. Some reach family members they haven't seen in decades. Some get lost in the mail. And some, the most honest ones, never get sent at all. They stay folded inside Bibles, hidden beneath mattresses, or tucked inside the pages of prison library books, waiting for someone to read them long after the writer's gone. There's one story that every Angola inmate knows, the story of Billy Sinclair. He was a former death row inmate who became the prison's first inmate journalist. In the 1980s, he ran the Angolite, Angola's in-house magazine. It became legendary, not for gossip or prison news but for raw truth. Billy and his co-editor, Wilbert Rideau, wrote about executions, racism, corruption, and the small mercies that made survival possible. Their work won national awards, even as they served life sentences. Rideau would later call Angola a warehouse of broken dreams. And Billy once wrote, "This place doesn't reform you. It reveals you." 4 men trapped inside, those words hit harder than any sermon. Not all voices from the farm are written though. Some live in memory, like the stories whispered in dorms when lights go out. Stories of ghosts walking the fields at night, of men hearing the clink of chains where no one's working, of gruesome Gertie's hum still echoing through the old chamber walls. Whether you believe them or not, these tales are Angola's oral history, passed down like myths that help men make sense of the unthinkable. And then there's the music. Every Sunday on the prison's local radio, KLSP 91.7 FM, the incarceration station, inmates host gospel shows, read poetry, and dedicate songs to loved ones they may never see again. A man serving life once introduced to him with these words: "We're not singing to get out. We're singing so we don't fall apart while we're still in." That's the sound of Angola, faith echoing through steel. But the most haunting voice of all belongs to the cemetery itself. Walk through Point Lookout, and you'll see crosses leaning toward each other like they're whispering secrets. No names, just numbers. Yet each one represents a life once lived, a story half told. The ground is soft there, too soft, and when it rains the soil sinks slightly as if the land is remembering every man it's ever swallowed. At sunset, the sky over the farm turns a deep, bruised orange. The same color as the uniforms in the fields below. From a distance it's beautiful, almost peaceful. But up close it's a painting made of sorrow. Because every voice that rises from this soil, whether sung, written, or whispered, carries the same unspoken truth. Angola isn't just where sentences end. It's where stories disappear. And yet, somehow those stories keep finding their way out. Through letters, through music, through the memories of anyone brave enough to listen. At the edge of Angola's 18,000-acre expanse, past the soybean fields and the razor wire, a dirt road winds toward a quiet hill. There are no signs, no traffic, no guards on horseback here, only the steady hum of cicadas and the faint scent of wet earth. This is Point Lookout Cemetery, the final destination for men who never made it home. A place where the living rarely visit, and the dead are known only by numbers. From a distance, the cemetery looks peaceful: green grass, white wooden crosses lined in rows, each tilting slightly under the Louisiana sun. But walk closer and you feel it, a heaviness that hangs in the air like humidity pressing against your chest. Each cross carries a small metal plate stamped with an inmate number. No name. No date. Just the mark of a man whose story ended where it began, inside Angola's gates. The burial team is made up of inmates too. They wear work boots and faded orange shirts, their hands calloused from years in the fields. When someone dies, from illness, age, or execution, these men are the ones who carry the coffin. They build the box in the prison woodshop, drive it to the hill in a flatbed truck, and lower it by hand into the earth. There's no family, no tears, no cameras. Just a short prayer from the prison chaplain and the rustle of the cypress trees. One of the burial crew members once said, "We treat every man the same, murderer or saint. When that box closes, he's just human again." He spoke softly, as if afraid the ground itself was listening. Because here, even the wind feels like it remembers. Point Lookout has been filling for more than a century. Over 3,000 inmates are buried here, unclaimed, unnamed, unseen. Some were executed. Most simply outlived the world that forgot them. In a way, it's Angola's truest archive, not of records or files, but of men whose lives were erased by time. Their bodies rest beneath the same soil they once tilled, under the same sun that watched them labor. The farm that fed them now keeps them. There's a small white shed near the entrance where a logbook is kept, a handwritten list of the dead. It's the only place you'll find their names. But the pages are yellowed, the ink fading. Some entries are misspelled. Some are missing altogether. And yet, for the inmates who bury their own, that list means everything. It's proof that someone existed, even if the world never knew them. The cemetery gets its name from the view at the top of the hill. From there, you can see the Mississippi River glimmering in the distance. On foggy mornings it looks like the water touches the sky, a horizon blurred between heaven and earth. Many inmates believe that's why the place feels sacred. As one lifer once said, if souls ever find a way out of Angola, they go through that view. Every few months, the burial team repairs the crosses, repainting them, straightening the ones that have tilted, replacing those that rotted away. It's not part of their sentence, it's part of their peace. A few of them even request to be buried there one day, next to the men they've buried before. Because in Angola, family isn't blood. It's the ones who remember your number when everyone else forgets. Visitors from outside rarely see Point Lookout. The road to it isn't on any tour. Even the annual rodeo crowds who cheer for inmate bull riders and buy crafts from the prison hobby shop never come this far. And yet, for those who know Angola's soul, this hill is its beating heart, quiet, constant, and unrelenting. During one visit, a former warden stood there in silence and whispered, "They say the ground here never settles." He wasn't wrong. When the rain falls hard, the soil shifts. Crosses lean, graves sink, and the earth breathes, as if restless from holding too many secrets. At dusk, when the sun bleeds into the river, the hill glows gold for a few moments. Then darkness takes it back. The insects sing. The air cools. And the white crosses fade into silhouettes, hundreds of them stretching into the night. This is the quiet truth of Angola. Even in death there is no escape. Only a different kind of waiting. Before Angola was a prison, it was a plantation, one of the largest in the American South. The land stretched wide and wild along the Mississippi River, rich with soil that grew cotton, sugarcane, and human misery. Its owner, Isaac Franklin, made a fortune trafficking enslaved people, men and women torn from their homes in Africa, including a region then known as Angola. That's where this place got its name. Even now, nearly 2 centuries later, the earth still carries their story, a story of bondage that never truly ended, only changed uniforms. When the Civil War ended, slavery was outlawed, but freedom didn't come to this land. Louisiana replaced chains with shackles, auctions with sentencing. They called it convict leasing. Former slaves, now labeled criminals for the smallest offenses, loitering, vagrancy, speaking too loud, were rented out to work the same fields their ancestors once died in. Angola became the state's most profitable farm once again. And the men who ran it knew one truth: labor never dies, it just gets renamed. By the late 1800s, Louisiana bought the land outright and turned it into the Louisiana State Penitentiary. The fields stayed the same. The overseers became guards. The whip became a baton. The work never stopped. Photographs from the early 1900s show men in striped uniforms, bent under the sun, watched by guards on horses with rifles across their laps. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was 1850 all over again. This legacy seeps into every inch of the soil. Generations of inmates have worked it, plowing, planting, harvesting. The same tools. The same heat. The same horizon that never seems to move. Some call it the farm that never ends. Others call it by what it really is, a cycle carved into history and flesh. Even today, more than 75% of Angola's inmates are black, serving life sentences with no chance of parole. Most will die where they stand. They labor under the same sun that burned their great-grandfathers, watched by towers built on land bought with the profit of slavery. And every shovel of dirt, every crop that rises from the ground, comes from soil soaked in the blood of 2 centuries of suffering. There's a cruel poetry in it, that the men condemned to die now feed the same earth that once consumed their ancestors. It's not just history. It's inheritance. A living reminder that America's prison system didn't appear from nowhere. It grew from these fields, watered by injustice. When journalists visit Angola, wardens often call it a working community, a place of discipline and faith. But the old-timers, the ones who've seen the cycle turn again and again, call it what it's always been, the farm of no return. A place where men live and die under the illusion of change, where every sunrise feels the same as the one before it. Yet somehow, within that repetition, a strange form of endurance blooms. The men still sing. They still pray. They still write letters to children who may never read them. And when they bury another brother on Point Lookout, they whisper the same line every time. Dust to dust. Blood to soil. Because here in Angola the past isn't behind them. It's beneath them, alive, silent, and waiting. Angola Prison stands as both a warning and a wound. It's proof that a nation's history doesn't disappear. It just changes shape, taking on new walls, new uniforms, new rules. What began as a plantation became a penitentiary. What began as chains became sentences without end. Every acre of this place tells a story of labor, faith, punishment, and survival. Men wake before dawn to work the same ground that once enslaved their ancestors. They pray for forgiveness inside a chapel surrounded by wire. They bury their dead on a hill that watches the river flow, always away, never back. For the outside world, Angola is a curiosity, a headline, a documentary, a dark piece of American folklore. But for the men inside, it's home, hell, and history all at once. They live in the shadow of gruesome Gertie, in the echo of chains, under skies too wide to escape. Some find redemption. Some find madness. Most simply fade, their stories buried with them under numbered crosses. And yet, the land remembers. It remembers every life taken, every seed sown, every prayer whispered through the bars. It remembers the slaves, the convicts, the condemned. Because no matter how many fences you build, you can't bury memory. Not here. Not on the death farm. So the next time someone says justice is blind, remember Angola. A place where justice still wears the color of the soil.